Hey, Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, sir. How about you?
I'm doing
Mhm.
well. I'm super pumped because we're going to talk about some of my favorite stuff, some of your favorite stuff. We're going to talk Adobe. Yeah,
All day, every day.
amen, amen. And I think, what we're going to talk about today uh, is super important because how how you identify people, whether you call them people, your peeps, your homies, your folks, you know, it actually it really does impact the numbers and what you can report out on and maybe how you want to phrase what you're reporting out on. So would you mind kind of talking about how you're going to teach us and show us the different ways that you can identify your fellow peeps with Adobe?
Sure thing. Yeah. I put together a little presentation, and I'm not going to go through that now, but I think we're going to link to that in
Yeah.
this article. So there'll be parts that people can go through if they want to get to some details. But in essence, here I'll switch. I'll invite some of my friends together. In the different Adobe tools, a person isn't a person isn't a profile or isn't a unique visitor. There's this multiplicity effect that can happen to people inside of Adobe's tool set, especially if you're sharing audiences. So um, yeah, all gimmicks aside, the differences between visitors inside of Adobe Analytics and people inside of customer journey analytics or
Mhm.
profiles inside of the CDP, and the fact that you can share audiences between them all really kind of impacts the
Yeah.
numbers and the analysis that you can do. So that's that was the kind of the core nugget of the presentation that I was asked to put together for a client of ours.
No, that's awesome. I love it. And I do think we could start at the very beginning. I think we can start with Adobe Analytics that we all kind of have known and loved and maybe grown up with. And with their visitor, I know we use the nice term visitor, but is it really like a visitor like you and I think of, like we're having visitors come over to our house, or what is there a little catch to it?
Oh yeah, no, there's a catch, and there's a lot of different features, and there's a huge history. So you and I have both been
Yep,
working with Adobe Analytics for quite some time, since before it was named Adobe Analytics, and
exactly.
there's been an evolution of the way that they track visitors, and
Hmm.
so. I'll keep it to recent day, but basically, we're talking about cookies, first party cookies on people's machines, or the Experience Cloud ID or the Marketing Cloud ID. It's
Yep.
essentially interchangeable. So that MID value or the ECID value is a cookie, and it suffers from all of the cookie deletion um, technology that's targeting it at
Hmm.
Apple and other technologies that'll make it expire pretty much quicker than it used to, for better for worse. And so
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it basically is akin to browsers, although there's other features in Adobe Analytics that you can do some cross-device analytics. And But yeah, but essentially we're talking about cookies on people's machines. I mean, really, when you talk about visitors, you're talking about devices.
Yeah. So I think that's the key point is like you and I, when we're on our computers here, we're one visitor. But if we were to use our tablet that's sitting out, by the couch later tonight, we could look like, even though it's still us, we look like a different person in there.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the cross-device analytics feature isn't available to
yeah.
everybody, so you can pick an EVAR as another identifier, and you can try to stitch together. So it'll link the ECIDs and in the whatever ID you have in this other container, in an EVAR, and
Yeah.
can try to do some linking between them. But again, not everyone has that. Customer journey analytics does have a feature as well. It's called
Yeah.
cross-device or cross-channel analytics, and so um, that feature does basically the same thing. I mean, CJA is essentially Adobe Analytics in a pointing at a different database, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good segue. Look at you working the segue in here. I
Mm-hmm.
love it. And so, yeah, so moving, like you said, so customer journey analytics, CJA, it's kind of like an addition. So you can still use Adobe Analytics and you can also kind of up, move up to it, customer journey analytics, where you can pull in more data. So kind of like some of the bigger uh, features of CJA is pulling additional data points in. And like you're talking about, so not only can you pull in like your retail data or call center data and marry it with your analytics data, but you have more ways to maybe identify people. Is that correct?
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, if anyone who's ever tried to integrate other data sources into analytics, Adobe Analytics has probably not found that particularly easy unless it's something
Yeah.
simple like email or something. But I mean, yeah, it can be tricky, and the features that do that are getting a little bit
Mhm.
long in the tooth, so they're a little bit older. So CJA is really much better for integration with other data sets. So yeah, getting your call center data or other things into AEP into a data set isn't nearly as difficult as it is getting it into Adobe Analytics natively. And so once it's in AEP, CJA can pull any of that data into itself. So yeah, CJA tends to be the tool for integrating that data. That's kind of its one of its main purposes. So to do that, you need to come
Yeah.
up with an identifier that's common to those data sets. And so cross-channel analytics gives you the
Mhm.
ability to pick more than one, but
Yeah.
there's still some limitations. And so when you are but yeah, the main identifier in CJA is a person by default, but you can name it whatever you like based off of the data you pull in. So if you want to call it visitors, you could, but it defaults to people or to a person, and yeah, and it's a little bit different because you get to pick those identifiers. But let's assuming you could pick
Yeah.
something like a hashed email address and an ECID because you probably have Adobe Analytics data streaming into AEP, so you're probably still
Yeah.
using CJA to look at that data with call center
Exactly.
data or something, and your call center might come through on a phone number or hashed email or
Hmm.
something else. So it has to be linked. And so that once it's all linked up together, that identifier is no longer a visitor, although ECIDs are in the mix. It's called people because the definition is slightly different.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
So with that hashed
yeah.
ID, like tell me how, so then you have that and you can have that potentially both in like your laptop and then you have it later on your tablet. And so with customer journey analytics, since we can use something other than like your ECID or even like you talked about earlier, like a transaction ID to tie data together, since we can use that hash, then my different ECIDs, all of a sudden I do look like that one person with that hashed emails up. Huh.
Yeah, that's the idea, but there are gotchas, like so many things, and so the way it does that linking between
Yeah.
HTML and ECID is Adobe will do a replay of the data, so they're constantly, it's either nightly or weekly. They'll look for all of the combinations. So they'll look at the data set, say the Adobe Analytics data set that comes through. And so they'll look at
Yeah.
all the ECIDs and look for, are there any rows of data that also have a hashed email address or, if it's a phone number or something, but say hashed email address.
Yep.
If it does, then it'll stitch those two together. It'll recognize, okay, this is the same. No, we've already called out these two identifiers. You've pointed out to CJA where they are in the data. So it'll point them out. They're the same person. And so it will basically replay that data and stitch them together. So they'll become one person. So if you have multiple devices, your ECIDs
Yep.
all become one person. But there's a limit to how far back they look. So
Okay.
if you had old traffic that was sitting out there for many
Yep.
weeks, and then one day you come in, you log in, it's only that new data forward. It doesn't replay in perpetuity. So there's nuance to it, and yeah, I go through that in a lot more depth. So, but essentially, the dream and the reality is you can stitch the devices together, but there's caveats. But
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I mean, I understand like it'd be nice to go back and probably forever, but at
yeah,
least going back somewhat to help kind of bridge the gap and help us look like one person, a true person, not just our device, is super great.
yeah, yeah. And so the CDP is a
Yes.
place where you can go back much further. And so
How,
this way,
I
this
love
the
how Adobe
Adobe's
lets you like kind of stair step into this. You have Adobe Analytics where you still get some really great data. You just have to know, hey, it's device based as your visitor. And now they have customer journey analytics, like you talked about, where we can try to stitch people together a little bit more, where we have like that, like you said, a hashed email or a phone number, or probably even like if people are logging in, you have that logged in ID that you could tie people with. And so you're kind of stair stepping your way in. And now, Adobe, you're going to talk about their real time CDP.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
Yep. So their real-time CDP is like there's lots of CDPs in the world, and so theirs works really similar. So it works off of profile snippets. So every bit of data that comes into the CDP
Yeah.
becomes a snippet with a profile. You can add many more identifiers than just two in the real-time CDP. But if you were working from those two, say hash email and
Yeah.
ECID again, instantly when you get a new hit, so all of the traffic, all that historic traffic on the ECID from weeks ago, if today you came in with a beacon that all connects it to a hashed email address, the hashed email address would have its own profile snippet and the ECID would have its own, and then when they both show up together, all of that traffic would be combined retroactively. It would just basically add a new linkage in the CDP in the profile store saying that this ECID is the same as this hashed email address, and it will just combine them all. So when you
Oh, I
do
love it.
a segment or a query, you'd be getting all of the devices linked to those. It can be, for better or for worse. If you're using a testing email address, then you're going to link. You're going to have a lot of profile collapsing, but that's a whole other. So no solution is perfect. But
No, but I do think this is nice that because I feel like there's a, like you talked about earlier with like a privacy and maybe the cookies not lasting as long as they have before that people are working really hard to try to get like that first party data, get that email address and provide meaning for it. So when you're asking me for an email address that you're giving the client something great in return or trying to get them to sign in. And I think it's great that we can celebrate that once we're able to do that, we don't
right.
have a constraint of like, oh, well, you needed to do that much faster. Here we're like, okay, way to nurture it and make the connection. So now we can take the real-time CDP and look much further back. So I love it. Makes all the
Yeah.
hard work pay off there.
It does. It does. Yeah. Yeah. And you're even able to share audiences between all the tools, although not in every direction. You can't go from CDP to CJA, but you can go from CJA to Adobe Analytics. But everything we talked about then applies, because if you took the CJA filter and you shared that with the
Yes.
CDP, it needs to get translated into profiles. Profile segments work, or CDP segments work off of profiles. That's the root of what you're segmenting. That's the audience you're generating when you create a segment there. So when you create a filter in CJA, you're creating a
Yep.
group of people that qualify for that segment. And then you share that with CDP and you're sharing the definition, but then the audience that inside the CDP is all the profiles. And so it's wider. So you may have, inside of the CJA, you miss some of that ECID traffic from weeks ago.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your analysis, so the population of that audience is going to be different when you share it with the CDP. The CDP has all of that together. You're going to get likely fewer profiles in the CDP because it's combined all the profiles together based off of these connections. And then from there, you can share it with Adobe Analytics and it gets converted back into ECID. So an audience inside the CDP grows a lot when it goes to Adobe Analytics because it gets, it's counting all of the devices inside of that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that CDP, right now, our true loves are Adobe Analytics, the analytics piece, but that CDP, it can feed other Adobe products, right? Like Target and stuff. So
right. Yeah. It's used for activation. Yeah. It's an activation powerhouse. Yeah. Other third-party tools. Yeah.
I love it. Now this is so great. So Mark, this has been fantastic. It's great, like we said, to see the journey from Adobe Analytics. So we're doing where it's devices. So we know the devices. So we move from devices all the way to profiles and even sharing audiences. And, along with anything, as things change and morph, there's changes in the data, like you talked about. And sometimes that can be a little overwhelming, a little scary, the whole moving my cheese, even though I know we need to move from devices to profiles and to shared audiences. How have you kind of worked with other people to help them kind of maybe make peace and understand, like, this is the journey, what do we expect, and to be okay with it?
Sure, yeah, because I think it's okay. It's just you need understanding and trying to resist that urge to freak out a little bit if the numbers don't equal each other, even though you're sharing the same thing across platforms. So in CJA, we've done things like we've created Adobe Analytics only data views. So even though you have you have CJA and you have all this cross channel analytics capability there. We do cut a view of it so that you can see just your analytics stuff. And so then,
Yeah.
the numbers look a little bit more friendly. You get access to the ECIDs within CJA. So you can create new metrics inside of CJA. So you can recreate the visitor metric outside of the people metric inside of CJA, especially on a view like that, where you can make things look a little bit more friendly. But I mean, I think it's just you need to have the understanding that the tools are meant for different purposes, and there's advantages and disadvantages to each. So even though you have, what might be, 6 ECIDs, 6 visitors inside of Adobe Analytics in a certain audience, and that collapses down to one profile, which kind of bubbles out to maybe 2 people or something inside of CJA. That each is still a valuable audience to be used. So if you're using the profile and you want to push out all those ECIDs to some to a personalization, then you want it to be able to target each of them. If you just want to do analysis, you may want to be able to tell that they were different people inside of CJA. But yeah.
Now, I love that approach of you're taking, because as you roll out, as we move through this process, having that year over year, whether it's year over year, month over month, day over day, that kind of reporting is always something that people look at. And so you being able to make the slides even within CJA to say, hey, this is what it would have looked like, within Adobe Analytics. So you can kind of still do a year over year comparison and get comfortable with it. That's a really great way to kind of give me my safety blanket and help me have confidence moving forward. I love it. That's a great solution.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, there are things to look out for there too. You're probably going to find yourself a couple of bots you didn't realize were in your data, but yeah, when they don't add up, that will be my pro tip to go for what to hunt for. It's probably a bot, but
love it. Thanks for the tip. And thanks so much for talking us and showing us how we've moved from devices all the way to shared audiences, and the benefits that it will give us, and the pro tips to say, hey, keep an eye out for this when you're moving from one to another. Thanks so much,
Sure.
Mark. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Cheers. Love to talk about it.